Welcome to episode 2 of this Pygame series, where we will be attempting to recreate the popular Commodore 64 video game Shadow Switcher. The game's creator, Christian Gleinsner, has granted me permission to post the videos and code related to his game. If you are not familiar with the original game, I recommend checking it out at the links below. In today's video, I'm going to cover some Python and Pygame coding fundamentals. Where we left off in the last video, we had set up the dev environment and had a sample bare bones program code running. Alright, in this segment, I thought I would cover a few of the Python basics before we go any further with the Python or Pygame template that we looked at in the previous segment. I kind of wanted to point out a few websites. One that's really good, it's broken into about a dozen or so sections, and it's pythontutorials.net. The first 4 or 5 sections are the ones that we probably would want to focus on. The fundamentals, the section 2 is operators, section 3 is control flow, section 4 is functions, and then it goes into lists and then more advanced topics. Another website that's really good for beginners is this geeksforgeeks.org Python/Python-basics website. And it has really good examples of the way that you can use Python and some really good explanations. But what I thought I would do is really quickly kind of bring it back to the Commodore 64. And if we were going to write a quick program to do something, let's say we just started at 100 and we were going to print, let's start at like 150 and go print hello world. It's really simple. That's what we did on this one. That's the equivalent program from Python. But now if we wanted to loop that, let's say on line 100, we could put for I is equal to 1 to 10. And then on 160, we could say next I. So we have 3 lines, right, in Commodore Basic. And that will print the string hello world 10 times. Just to kind of get us started, I'm just going to show a few simple examples. In Python, what we could do is the same similar setup. Instead of saying for I is equal to 1 to 10, what we would do, you say for I in range 1, comma, and then in this case, you have to use 11 because if you look at the inline help here, it tells you that the start, so this 1 here is inclusive. It will include 1, but the stop is exclusive, meaning you need to go 1 additional item, and if you want 10, if you want it to go 10 times. And then you put a colon at the end, and then notice when you hit enter, you're already indented. Python, this VS Code does that for you automatically. So I'm just going to copy and paste and tab it over. And so now if you were to execute this code, in theory, it should run that string and print that string 10 times. So let's do that. And sure enough, if you can see that down here, it indeed is displaying 10 times. Now there's a few extra things you could do, like if we go back to our Commodore Basic. For example, say we wanted it to skip and only print every other, print hello world every other time. So we could say step 2. In Commodore Basic, and if you run that, now we're only going to print 5. We could also put a semicolon here and print out the value of I. When it runs, you'll see it'll do every odd one at 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Similarly, over here, we could, in the range, we could put a comma and put the step value. And then if you want to print the value of I, you can just do a comma I right there. And let's run that and see if we get similar results. And sure enough, down here, hello world 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. The next thing I wanted to do was sort of introduce the if statements, like so how you can do an if statement in Python. The equivalent, let's do it in BASIC first, what we would do. So if we eliminate the step, just for this example, we just take that out. And instead, on line, let's say 110, we say if I is equal to 5, then print I is equal to 5. Notice I put 2 equal signs because that's how Python, it works in Python. Hit enter, and then list it and run. So here it prints 1 through 10, but then when it hit 5, it's going to print I is equal to 5 as well as print hello world 5 there. So let's do the equivalent over here. So instead of having the step range, we'll strip that out. And you can say if I is equal 5, instead of saying then, you put a colon. So you would hit colon. And then down here, when you hit enter, it's already indented for you, because that's how Python works, by using indentation. So anything that's indented is a local scope of that if statement. So if we say print I is equal to 5, and that's pretty much it, right? That should do exactly what the other one did. But we could improve it. So it did it right here. I is equal 5. So say we wanted to print that, but not print, when it does that, we don't want it to print this. Well, over here in Python, we could do an else statement. So you can put a colon, and as long as we indent, now it's going to loop through and print hello world every time, unless it's equal to 5, then it's only going to print that. And so let's run that. So you see 1 through 4, and then 5, I equals 5, just like I was mentioning. The other thing that Python has that you don't have this else, and you don't have the else if statement in Commodore Basic. So the else, elif, you could put I equal or I is less than 8 or something like that. Maybe we put I here. So if you did something like I is less than 8, then you're not going to get anything for 9 and 10. So let's run that. So yeah, so you don't get, less than 8, so you don't get 8, 9, or 10, which is exactly right. And in order to construct something like that in Commodore Basic, it gets a little messy because you don't have the else. You have to put some additional if statements in there to handle something like that. And then in some cases you end up throwing in go-tos, and it gets a little ugly. That's not what we want to do. Python is much cleaner than that. Now I'm using the variable I here, and that's just because in Commodore Basic you're limited to 2 characters for a variable name. You can use more than 2, but Commodore Basic only looks at the first 2 characters. So if you could have a variable like line 5, you could say ABCD is equal to 3 or something, but really it's only going to use the first 2 characters. Whereas in a more advanced modern language like Python, you can have much longer variable names. I just wanted to quickly interject here to show an early build of the program and to make sure I don't lose so many viewers by deep diving too quickly into complicated programming topics. I realize everyone learns at their own pace, so let's take a quick look before we jump back into the programming. And I realize the colors and the graphics are hideous at this point. But I just want to show that this early build, we have an enemy moving around semi-randomly, and then the player, which is blue, can move around by using the arrow keys up, down, left, and right on the keyboard. And I realize you have to understand this is an early build. The graphics are definitely something I'm going to work on, changing and improving. But this would be an early build of level 1. And on the next video, I'm planning on demonstrating how we can go around building the graphics and loading a map like what I'm showing and demonstrating in this section of the video. Alright, so with that said, let's go back to our regularly scheduled programming. Now that I'm on that topic of variable names, I'm just going to go over a few things that I've learned here, and it's fairly recent, so I'm not an expert by any means on any of this. But in Python, there's some naming conventions, and the first one I wanted to talk about is if you have multiple words, say you have like high score. In Python, if you have multiple words, according to their standards, they're what they call PEP standards, and we can look at that. There's tons of information on it. They want you to use multiple words separated by an underscore. And that's what is something that I have just recently learned is called snake case. And that's as opposed to something like if you were to go capital on the first letter and then capital on the second word. And see how it automatically swapped it? That was nice. But if you were to try to do this, That is called Pascal case, is my understanding. There might be other names for it. So that's a different way, a different naming convention, and you're not supposed to use that for variable names and for subroutines or functions. You're supposed to just use snake case, and it's supposedly more readable for everyone. And that was the whole idea behind these PEP standards, and we can look that up real quick. The latest one is called PEP 8. I think it's the latest one. And essentially what they're trying to do is give some rules for everyone to use to make your code readable. And in some cases, you know, it does make sense. It doesn't always maybe jive with the way you might want to write programs. What you might think is more readable may not fall in line with the standards. But one example I wanted to show is in the case here where you're passing some variables and you're doing some additions. Here it's showing the incorrect way to do it. I mean, it's all a matter of opinion, right? Well, so they have the plus signs at the end and the minus at the end. But if you just move them to the left side, that kind of meets the standards, and they say it's a lot more easier. And I happen to agree. I think that is a lot easier to read. So there's a bunch of standards that are these PEP standards for Python, and you can read all about it here on this website, but I wouldn't get too caught up in all that because it gets really into the weeds on that. So just kind of use common sense. Now, one place you can use the Pascal case is on classes. They're okay with that. For some reason, if you're going to define a class, and we'll go into what classes are a little bit later, but they're okay with you using the Pascal case for classes. Okay, so that was a little bit of a diversion, but I wanted to discuss that. And then going back to the Python tutorial, if you wanted to learn all about how you can do if statements, it's under the control flow. And then it kind of shows you with some flow charts how you can do if then else's, and gives you some more examples of how to do a couple of simple things with if statements. And then I think also all of this stuff is important to learn, but I'm just going to skip ahead to operators because the arithmetic operators, there are a few differences that if you're used to the Commodore basic version, that it's a little different in a modern language. And so here you do have plus and minus. You have the asterisk for multiplication. You have the / for floating point division, 2 // for floor division, which essentially strips the floating point result. You have a % for the remainder, or a mod operation, and you have 2 asterisks, which represents exponent. So 5 ** 2 is going to be 25. It's 5 to the second power. This website is beautiful because you just go down and just look at how you can do these examples, and then it has a button to try the results, which is beautiful. It's really nice. And if we quickly take a look at the assignment operators, you could say count equal to 0, count equals count plus 1, or you can actually combine that to count plus equals 1. It's the same thing as count is equal to count plus 1. And you can pretty much do that with plus, minus, multiplication, and division, and all of these examples right here. It's just a shorter way to write the same code. It's little tricky things that you sometimes cannot do these things in Commodore Basic. And then looking at comparison operators. So if you're trying to compare one value to another, you got less than, equal, greater than or equal. So all of these are similar to Commodore Basic, but then for equals, you have to use 2 equal signs. And then not equal to is a bang equal or exclamation equal. And then it's telling you here, these comparison operators compare 2 values and return a Boolean value of either true or false. And then it goes on to give you some examples. And so if you were to print these right here as apple less than orange, you can compare strings. This is something that you really can't do in Commodore Basic. And then you get results. So you can try your code out, and you can even go in here and edit the code and try your own examples. And I think that is just absolutely beautiful. So then let's kind of go through here, and we'll go into control flow. The one we already covered was the if and else. Let's go ahead and look at the for loop with a range. And this is what I was showing in my earlier example. And then it has more examples. So you don't have to have a comma. You could just say in range of 5, for example, and it will do what I was doing from 1 to 5. So that makes it a little bit easier. Anyway, I do recommend going through this website and checking that out. And if you want, I think what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and what if we wanted to go back and just use that example and say 1, 2, or we'll just do a range of 10 and print that just to see if that works. And you notice 0 through 9. So it does it 10 times, but it's 0 through 9. Now, if you wanted to make this a subroutine, what we can do is in Python use the command def and you give it a name. So we'll say print hello world open close parens. So we're not going to pass any parameters down to it, and then highlight this and tab it over if that's what you want in your subroutine. And then down here we can just call the subroutine print hello world, and we could copy that and do it twice if we wanted to. And let's run that and see if it works. And it did. It went so quick. See how there's 2 of them down here. So that is how you can define a function, and it's similar to what Commodore Basic. You would have to set this up as a subroutine. Like you'd have to have line 70 be a return, and then line 10 would have to be a go sub 100. And then let's say line 99 would end the program. And then you run this, it runs through. I forgot I've left some of my previous code in there, but that runs it as a subroutine. And then if we were to go to line 15 and do it again, that would be running it 2 times. So anyhow, I think that's enough of the Commodore equivalents, because there's not... These 2 languages are night and day. I mean, Microsoft came out with it, what, 40-something years ago, and then it was licensed by Commodore to use. And it's what a lot of people learn computer programming from. So anyhow, I'm going to end this one here. Join me for the next video. We'll continue with a little bit of the programming tutorials, and we'll go into some of the tools for building the graphics and laying out the map for the level 1 of Shadow Switcher. Thanks for watching.